Chapter 16 of Narrative of the Life of David Crockett of the State of Tennessee. Having now closed my hunting for that winter, I returned to my hands, who were engaged about my boats and staves, and made ready for a trip down the river. I had 2 boats and about 30,000 staves, and so I loaded with them and set out for New Orleans. I got out of the Obion River, in which I had loaded my boats, very well. But when I got into the Mississippi, I found all my hands were bad scared, and in fact I believe I was scared a little the worst of any, for I had never been down the river, and I soon discovered that my pilot was as ignorant of the business as myself. I hadn't gone far before I determined to lash the 2 boats together. We did so, but it made them so heavy and obstinate that it was next to kin to impossible to do anything at all with them, or to guide them right in the river. That evening we fell in company with some Ohio boats, and about night we tried to land, but we could not. The Ohio men hollered to us to go on and run all night. We took their advice, though we had a good deal rather not, but we couldn't do any other way. In a short distance we got into what is called the Devil's Elbow, and if any place in the wide creation has its own proper name, I thought it was this. Here we had about the hardest work that I ever was engaged in my life to keep out of danger, and even then we were in it all the while. We twice attempted to land at woodyards which we could see, but couldn't reach. The people would run out with lights and try to instruct us how to get to shore, but all in vain. Our boats were so heavy that we couldn't take them much anyway, except the way they wanted to go, and just the way the current would carry them. At last we quit trying to land, and concluded just to go ahead as well as we could, for we found we couldn't do any better. Sometime in the night I was down in the cabin of one of the boats, sitting by the fire, thinking on what a hobble we had got into, and how much better bear hunting was on hard land than floating along the river, when a fellow had to go ahead whether he was exactly willing or not. The hatchway into the cabin came slap down right through the top of the boat, and it was the only way out except a small hole in the side, which we had used for putting our arms through to dip up water before we lashed the boats together. We were now floating sideways, and the boat I was in was the hindmost as we went. All at once I heard the hands begin to run over the top of the boat in great confusion, and pull with all their might, and the first thing I knowed after this, we went broadside full tilt against the head of an island where a large raft of drift timber had lodged. The nature of such a place would be, as everybody knows, to suck the boats down and turn them right under this raft, and the uppermost boat would, of course, be sucked down and go under first. As soon as we struck, I bulged for my hatchway, as the boat was turning under sure enough. But when I got to it, the water was pouring through in a current as large as the hole would let it, and as strong as the weight of the river could force it. I found I couldn't get out here, for the boat was now turned down in such a way that it was steeper than a housetop. I now thought of the hole in the side, and made my way in a hurry for that. With difficulty I got to it, and when I got there I found it was too small for me to get out by my own dower, and I began to think that I was in a worse box than ever. But I put my arms through and hollered as loud as I could roar, as the boat I was in hadn't yet quite filled with water up to my head, and the hands who were next to the raft, seeing my arms out, and hearing me holler, seized them and began to pull. I told them I was sinking, and to pull my arms off, or force me through, for now I knowed well enough it was neck or nothing, come out or sink. By a violent effort they jerked me through, but I was in a pretty pickle when I got through. I had been sitting without any clothing over my shirt. This was torn off, and I was literally skinned like a rabbit. I was, however, well pleased to get out in any way, even without shirt or hide, as before I could straighten myself on the boat next to the raft, the one they pulled me out of went entirely under, and I have never seen it any more to this day. We all escaped onto the raft, where we were compelled to sit all night, about a mile from land on either side. 4 of my company were bareheaded and 3 barefooted, and of that number I was one. I reckon I looked like a pretty cracklin' ever to get to Congress. We had now lost all our loading and every particle of our clothing except what little we had on. But over all this, while I was setting there in the night, floating about on the drift, I felt happier and better off than I ever had in my life before. For I had just made such a marvelous escape that I had forgot almost everything else in that, and so I felt prime. In the morning, about sunrise, we saw a boat coming down, and we hailed her. They sent a large skiff and took us all on board and carried us down as far as Memphis. Here I met with a friend that I never can forget as long as I am able to go ahead at anything. It was a Major Winchester, a merchant of that place. He let us all have hats and shoes and some little money to go upon, and so we all parted. A young man and myself concluded to go on down to Natchez to see if we could hear anything of our boats, for we supposed they would float out from the raft and keep on down the river. We got on a boat at Memphis that was going down and so cut out. Our largest boat, we were informed, had been seen about 50 miles below where we stove, and an attempt had been made to land her, but without success, as she was as hard-headed as ever. This was the last of my boats, and of my boating, for it went so badly with me, along at the first, that I hadn't much mind to try it any more. I now returned home again, and as the next August was the congressional election, I began to turn my attention a little to that matter, as it was beginning to be talked of a good deal among the people. End of chapter 16.